Have you ever encountered someone whose emotions seem to shift like the wind, whose physical symptoms are just as changeable, and who feels everything deeply, especially their relationships? Someone who might be, in tears one moment and laughing the next, maybe without a clear, rational reason, but they're always just profoundly impacted by the emotional atmosphere around them.
It's a fascinating question, actually, because for many people, someone like that might seem, well, unpredictable, maybe even confusing.
Yeah.
Their reactions can sometimes, defy conventional logic. But what if that very changeability, that profound emotionality, that almost sort of childlike sincerity isn't a flaw or just a fleeting mood, but the actual core of their being?
Right, like it's fundamental.
Exactly. What if it's a fundamental aspect of their disposition, a kind of holistic blueprint that guides pretty much every aspect of their existence?
Welcome to the Deep Dive. Today, we're taking a really fascinating journey into the world of Pulsatilla, a unique constitutional type.
Yeah.
Our source is this really rich collection of homeopathic texts we've been immersing ourselves in. They repeatedly call Pulsatilla the weathercock among remedies, which is such a vivid metaphor, and I can tell you diving into these descriptions has been an absolute eye-opener.
Indeed. And when we refer to constitutional types in this deep dive, what we're really talking about is a holistic blueprint of an individual.
Yeah.
Right? It covers their deep-seated predispositions across mind, body, emotions. The whole picture.
Okay.
It's about seeing the whole person as this unique pattern, where symptoms aren't just isolated things, but they're interconnected expressions of that underlying type. And that helps guide us to the most appropriate understanding.
Gotcha.
So our mission for this deep dive is basically to unpack the intricate layers of Pulsatilla, starting with its defining mental and emotional landscape, then moving through its distinctive physical expressions across various body systems and hitting the crucial modalities. That's what makes a Pulsatilla patient feel better or worse.
And we'll also explore its role across different life stages, right? Tracing how this unique disposition kind of navigates childhood into adulthood, and crucially, how it stacks up against other constitutional types.
Exactly. By the time we're done, you should walk away with a really nuanced understanding of this highly emotional, deeply sensitive, and often, I think you'd agree, quite misunderstood disposition.
I would definitely agree. So settle in. Let's unpack this. So when we talk about Pulsatilla, the absolute core, the starting point for really getting it, isn't a physical symptom at all, is it?
Got it all.
Our sources really emphasize that the disposition and mental state are the chief guiding symptoms for selecting this remedy. It's just profoundly tied to this unique emotional nature.
Right.
It's not just a remedy for, a cough or a cold. It's about a very particular inner world, a way of being in the world.
And what's truly fascinating here is how the sources just immediately jump to this point, like right from the get-go.
Yeah, no messing around.
No, they're emphatically telling us that if you miss the emotional picture, if you don't grasp this fundamental emotional fluidity, you've likely missed Pulsatilla entirely. That weathercock metaphor, it isn't just some poetic flourish.
No.
It perfectly captures Pulsatilla's inherent changeability. It implies this constant, almost whimsical shift, a responsiveness to the slightest emotional breeze, but also, as we'll see, a physical responsiveness to external conditions too.
So what does changeable, contradictory truly mean for Pulsatilla, beyond just like surface level mood swings? Because the sources really hammer this home as a fundamental, almost defining aspect of their being. Is it just that they're a bit indecisive, or does it go deeper?
Oh, it goes much, much deeper than just being indecisive or having passing moods. This fluidity is a fundamental, pervasive aspect of their entire being. It affects not only their thoughts and emotions, but also their physical symptoms, even their preferences,
Wow.
Imagine someone who might crave, say, one food intensely, one day, maybe a rich, creamy dish, and then the very next day, they completely despise it, find it utterly repulsive.
Huh.
Or whose headache might shift rapidly from the front of the head to the side, or whose cough changes abruptly from dry to loose, or even seems to move from one lung to the other, all within the same day.
That constant shifting.
Exactly. This constant, almost whimsical alteration of symptoms, desires, feelings, that's a primary key to recognizing Pulsatilla. It's never static, always in motion, just like that weathercock turning with the wind.
I found a great phrase in the source material that really brings this to life. Mentally an April day. That perfectly conveys these rapid, often unprovoked shifts from profound sadness to unbridled joy or vice versa, sometimes within minutes.
Yeah.
And it's not just emotions, right? But even their ideas can appear flighty and unpredictable because, as the source states, their intellect often serves their emotional needs. It's almost as if their heart dictates their head.
Exactly. Their logic is often secondary to their feelings. If a decision or an idea feels right emotionally, they'll lean into it, even if it might not make complete rational sense to an outside observer. This deep emotional connection drives their thought processes, making their intellectual output seem, well, less linear, maybe less pragmatic, and perhaps even less consistent than other constitutional types.
Sure.
Their thinking tends to be somewhat woolly, as the source puts it.
Woolly, I like that.
Yeah, lacking precision and clarity because it's constantly being influenced by their shifting emotional state. They're likely to give up pretty easily when rational analysis is needed, preferring to operate from a place of intuition and feeling.
Now, a striking and really frequently mentioned aspect of Pulsatilla is its strong association with the feminine principle. The sources declare it preeminently a female remedy, especially for those with a mild, gentle, yielding disposition. It's described as embodying the feminine principle more purely than any other type. This immediately caught my attention.
This is a really crucial concept to understand within the framework of these texts. When we talk about the feminine principle here, it isn't about biological sex in a, limiting sense, but about a qualitative way of experiencing the world. It means living almost entirely through emotions, rather than suppressing them, or rationalizing them, or intellectualizing them away.
Right.
It's about prioritizing personal emotional satisfaction, connection, intuition, and nurturing above, say, external achievements, rigid logic, or societal expectations of stoicism. It's a type that feels everything openly, expresses it readily, and finds their core identity and security within intimate relationships and domestic harmony.
What's really interesting, though, and quite poignant, is the observation that there's a relative scarcity of adult pulsatillas. The sources actually speculate that this might reflect societal undervaluation or even systematic suppression of this very feminine principle. It makes you wonder what happens to these children as they grow up.
This raises a profoundly important question, doesn't it, about the impact of our societal norms and pressures. If a type that embodies pure, unedited emotion becomes rare in adulthood, what does that say about the society they live in? The sources suggest that our modern world might undervalue the feminine and systematically abuses it until it becomes something suppressed and twisted. Think about modern pressures, the emphasis on stoicism, on being strong, independent, rational, always in control of your feelings.
Right, the stiff upper lip sort of thing.
Exactly. Imagine a natural pulsatilla in a high-pressure corporate environment. Their innate need for emotional expression and personal connection might be seen as weakness, right? Leading them to suppress their true self, perhaps even developing anxiety, depression, or physical symptoms from this profound disconnect. They might, for instance, learn to mask their true feelings behind a facade of efficiency or rationality, becoming what the sources call an artificial type.
It makes you wonder how many individuals who started as natural pulsatillas as children might feel pushed away from such overt emotional expression as they mature, learning to edit their emotional lives, like you said. It's important to note, though, that while it's a predominant manifestation, the sources don't say only women can be pulsatilla. The principle can exist in anyone.
Correct. The core is the emotional principle, the disposition itself, not strictly the biological sex, although its expression is overwhelmingly seen in females in the sources, partly perhaps due to historical societal norms that allowed for greater emotional expression in women than in men.
Digging deeper into this emotional landscape, the sources paint such a vivid and consistent picture. Pulsatilla is sad, crying readily, weeps when talking, weeps easily, timid, irresolute, fears an evening to be alone, dark, ghost. Like sympathy, children like fuss and caresses, easily discouraged.
That's a lot of emotional real estate right there.
What's truly insightful here is that this isn't just, surface-level sadness or fleeting timidity. It's a deep, almost permeable emotional vulnerability. The easy weeping, often described as causeless or unprovoked, is a hallmark.
It's not manipulative. It's simply an overflow of feeling, a natural response to any emotional discomfort. Their need for sympathy and affection isn't a ploy to get attention, but a genuine, deeply felt emotional requirement for security and reassurance. When they receive that comfort, Their tears dry up almost instantly, and their mood shifts, which kind of proves the authenticity of their emotional state.
The text even provides specific rubrics from Kent's repertory, which for listeners are basically symptom classifications within homeopathic texts, like signposts, right?
Exactly, vital signposts.
Kent lists Pulsatilla under rubrics like mood, timid, sullen, suspicious, tearful, sad, restless, obscene, and highlights weeping under no less than 15 rubrics, which shows how pervasive it is.
In 15. Yeah.
And importantly, it's not that heavy, intense sobbing like you might see in Ignatia or Nature Muriaticum, but a gentle crying that responds remarkably well to reassurance and affection. This really solidifies the picture of their unique emotional vulnerability.
That distinction is absolutely crucial for differentiation. It distinguishes their emotional display from other types, who might also cry readily, maybe with different underlying mechanisms, different emotional depths, or different responses to comfort.
Right.
For Pulsatilla, affection, a gentle touch, kind words, these are genuinely ameliorating. They provide immediate emotional security and relief. Their timidity, their fears of being alone or in the dark, all stem from this deep-seated need for protection and emotional warmth.
It makes you consider how often we in society are conditioned to suppress our emotions, push them down or feel we need to be stoic and strong. Pulsatilla offers such a stark contrast, living openly and honestly through their feelings, for better or worse, almost without an emotional filter, especially when young.
Precisely.
It's a reminder of a different way to process the world.
Exactly. Their emotional authenticity is unedited. It's what makes them so endearing and, at times, so vulnerable to the perceived harshness of the world. They desire that emotional validation and connection above almost all else.
Beyond these more overt emotional traits, the sources reveal some truly unique and often challenging aversions and mental quirks that further define the Pulsatilla disposition. They mention morbid dread of the opposite sex, religious melancholy, given to extremes of pleasure and pain, and a particularly strong recurring symptom, aversion to marriage.
These aren't just random quirks. They're deep-seated manifestations of their sensitive and really impressionable nature. That morbid dread of the opposite sex, for instance, might stem from a profound vulnerability to what the sources call coarse sexuality, a perception of sexuality that feels crude or aggressive, just totally alien to their gentle nature.
Okay.
Or it could arise from strict religious teachings taken very literally in their formative years, leading to a profound repugnance to sexual matters because they perceive it as sinful or unclean.
Yeah.
This impressionable quality can lead them to internalize really extreme views.
I found a striking example of this in the sources. A man who, despite being married, takes it into his head that it is an evil thing to have sexual intercourse with his wife and abstains from it. Or the patient who dwells on sanctification until he becomes fanatical and insane, thinking he has sinned away his day of grace and is beyond salvation. It sounds like a deeply internal, almost self-imposed suffering that can just consume their entire mental landscape.
This raises an important question, though. How might these religious or sexual fixations be seen as a form of emotional security or control in a world that feels overwhelming to their sensitive disposition?
Interesting angle.
For a highly impressionable type like Pulsatilla, external moral codes, when internalized without much of a critical filter, can become rigid defenses against perceived threats to their emotional purity or safety. Their inherent craving for emotional security can lead them to extremes, whether in pleasure or pain, as their sensitive nature just amplifies every experience, turning it into a profound emotional event. The aversion to marriage often stems from this fear of the sexual aspect of marriage, or maybe a fear of losing their independence or emotional security within such a binding relationship.
As we transition into discussing Pulsatilla across the lifespan, it becomes really clear why childhood is so fundamental to understanding this constitutional type. The sources note that young children of both sexes are often Pulsatilla constitutionally. They are described as highly emotional, devoted, affectionate, and mild, providing their emotional needs are met. Which sounds like an ideal child, at least on the surface.
Plus, this stage is crucial because it represents Pulsatilla in its most natural type, right? Before societal influences begin to shape and sometimes distort their innate disposition, their emotional expression is completely unedited. If they hurt, whether the pain is emotional or physical, they cry openly, and there's no attempt to disguise her pain, which is then forgotten immediately once the comfort arrives.
Instantly forgotten.
Literally cry until they are comforted, and then they are instantly happy again. They're often described as having this rosy, florid complexion, sometimes blonde hair, blue eyes, and they're generally warm-blooded. They kick the covers off at night.
And it's interesting how their needs are described. They demand instant gratification and will cry and be petulant until their needs are met. It sounds almost, well, selfish in a way that some parents might find challenging.
It can seem that way.
The sources even confirm this, noting that in the playground, Pulsatilla will jealously guard her hoard of sweets and is jealous of other children if they are favored or given more attention.
But this selfishness isn't malicious or calculating. It's rooted in a profound, almost primal emotional insecurity. The source states, Pulsatilla is always looking for emotional security and very easily feels rejected or overlooked.
Ah, okay.
It's an immediate, unedited response to a perceived threat to their profound need for affection and attention. It's why they might whine and moan continually if unhappy, purely to attract that loving attention. As soon as they get it, as soon as that emotional need is met and they feel secure again, they are blissfully happy and compliant. They're extremely dependent, becoming anxious if parents are out of sight, and very fond of physical contact and indulgence.
I love the comparison the sources make between a pitiful Pulsatilla cry and a snarling Chamomilla cry, saying you will want to caress the one and spank the other.
Yes, it's so vivid.
And the visual detail of their coyness, with wide, innocent eyes and a tentative smile, it paints such a clear, almost irresistible picture of their endearing nature.
These vivid details are absolutely key to differentiation. They highlight the genuine innocence and vulnerability that makes the Pulsatilla child so endearing and prone to receiving the affection they crave. Chamomilla, by contrast, is known for its extreme irritability and rage.
Right.
The Pulsatilla child's cry melts your heart. The Chamomilla child's cry drives you to distraction. This distinction in the quality of the emotional expression is paramount in understanding the constitutional type.
Here's where it gets really interesting, because the sources then present this fascinating, almost alarming transformation. As they grow up, the majority of Pulsatilla children change into other constitutional types, leaving surprisingly few adult Pulsatillas. They even link this observation to blonde children often becoming darker as they get older, like a physical mirroring of an internal change.
It's fascinating, isn't it? This suggests that once the intellect begins to take over and edit the child's emotional life, the pure, unadulterated Pulsatilla state often diminishes. It's profound.
Yeah.
It implies that societal pressures to suppress, rationalize, or even punish overt emotional expression can fundamentally alter a natural disposition. The shift to types like natrum muriaticum, silica, phosphorus, lycopodium, or calcarea highlights how emotional suppression can create an artificial type, an individual who has learned to disguise or redirect their raw emotional responses to fit into a world that doesn't always value authentic feeling.
Like being told, don't be so sensitive, or stop crying, you're fine.
Exactly. Over time, this pressure forces them to internalize emotions, leading to a different expression of their underlying sensitivity.
So if most Pulsatilla children effectively grow out of being Pulsatilla due to this emotional editing, what does that mean for us as a society? Is the rarity of adult Pulsatillas a sign of a broader, suppressed emotional landscape in adults, where authenticity is edited out as children mature, almost for survival?
This raises a really important question about the impact of our societal norms. If we push individuals to be less overtly emotional, to prioritize rationality and efficiency over feeling, are we perhaps losing touch with the fundamental aspect of human nature? The source contrasts Pulsatilla, which is more natural, pure emotion, with natrum muriaticum, described as a more artificial type, created over thousands of years by the suppression of emotion. Natrum muriaticum learns to disguise herself with cloaks of efficiency, rationality, and acceptable mock emotion. It's a stark commentary on the choice between adapting to fit in and preserving one's inherent nature and the potential psychological cost of that adaptation.
And what about those who do remain Pulsatilla as adults? The sources indicate that the adult Pulsatilla is more personal in her interests than any other type. Her life is devoted to a search for and then a celebration of personal love. She is quite happy to stay at home and look after her husband and her children, being extremely nurturing. This sounds like a very specific kind of contentment.
Her identity is often intimately intertwined with her relationships. When these are stable and nurturing, she's deeply content. When threatened or absent, profound emotional instability and distress can ensue. Her passivity and indolence, a tendency towards ease, and a lack of overt ambition stem directly from this profound focus on domestic and personal emotional satisfaction.
Right.
She couldn't care less about politics or philosophy or the machinations of the modern world. As long as our home life is going smoothly, she lives in blissful ignorance, kind of cocooned in her emotional sanctuary. Her world revolves around her intimate circle.
There's a powerful anecdote in the sources about a Pulsatilla woman who felt entirely at sea after her husband died, having to learn how to live in the world and develop new skills in a very businesslike way. It really highlights how deeply her life was tied to her partner, and how her individuality only truly emerged, or was forced to emerge, when that external emotional anchor was removed. The sources even state, many Pulsatilla women do not even consider their individuality until they are left suddenly without their loved ones. It speaks volumes about their relational identity.
And what's fascinating here is the immense challenge for a Pulsatilla navigating a world that increasingly values fierce independence, external career achievements, and public recognition over domestic devotion and emotional connection.
Yeah, it's a clash.
It really is. Their inherent desire for a stable, loving home life might be seen as old-fashioned, unambitious, or even dependent in some modern contexts, leading to potential internal conflict or external judgment. Their very nature can feel out of sync with contemporary societal values.
And then there's the rare Pulsatilla man. The sources state he is rarely seen in men as a constitutional type. When they are encountered, they are described as very soft men who are shy of strangers and very loving towards their family. It feels almost like a role reversal in many traditional contexts.
This subversion of traditional gender roles in men who embody the feminine principle presents unique challenges in society. They are described as lacking in both positive and negative masculine qualities, as traditionally defined.
Okay.
He finds it difficult to assert himself and will tend to give way to keep the peace, avoiding confrontation at all costs. This can, as the source notes, lead to some degree of role reversal within a relationship, where the wife might become the primary breadwinner, the decision-maker, or the more assertive partner, simply because the Pulsatilla man naturally yields.
There's an insightful example mentioned. One of my male Pulsatilla patients had endured years of loneliness without a girlfriend before meeting his wife because he was too shy to get to know girls. And the source even interprets the rubric aversion to women as likely fear, which arises out of shyness rather than genuine dislike. It's a profound social challenge for this type, compounded by societal expectations of male assertiveness in dating.
It truly is. Their inherent shyness, especially with the opposite sex, can lead to prolonged periods of isolation and loneliness, as societal expectations often place the burden of initiation on men. This highlights how deeply a constitutional type can be impacted and potentially disadvantaged by the broader cultural context and prevailing gender norms. Their sweetness and gentle nature, while endearing once known, can be a barrier to initial connection in a world that often values overt confidence.
Now let's turn our attention to Pulsatilla's physical manifestations. What's truly striking is how the changeability we discussed in their mental state also permeates their entire physical being, starting with what the sources vividly call mucous membrane mayhem.
Yeah, mayhem is a good word for it.
Yeah.
What's fascinating here is the consistent pattern. Mucous membranes are all affected. This isn't localized. It's a systemic tendency.
Right.
And the discharges from these membranes are characteristically thick, bland, and yellowish green.
Okay. Thick, bland, yellowish green. Got it.
That applies across the board to their eyes, ears, nose, chest. It's this widespread catarrhal state, meaning an inflammation of the mucous membranes with increased discharge. And the membranes themselves often look purple, of venous congestion.
Purple.
Yeah, indicating that sluggish circulation. This characteristic combination of color, consistency, and blandness in the discharges, with the notable exception of the vaginal discharge, which can be excoriating, interestingly enough, is a signature keynote, a powerful diagnostic clue.
So we're talking about thick, profuse, yellow, bland discharges from the eyes, offensive odor from the ears, large green fetid scales in the nose, and copious mucus expectoration from the chest. That's a very specific and consistent picture across different parts of the body.
Indeed. The widespread nature of this catarrh suggests a systemic tendency toward venous engorgement, where blood pools sluggishly in the capillaries and veins. When we talk about venous engorgement, is it fair to think of it almost like a sluggish, congested internal system where blood isn't flowing freely and tends to pool, creating a kind of traffic jam in their smaller blood vessels?
That's a great way to visualize it, yeah. It implies that feeling of internal fullness or sluggishness, and it would explain that characteristic purplish or mottled look we see in affected tissues, even the skin. It's a systemic characteristic, not just isolated symptoms.
Precisely. This sluggish circulation manifests in various ways, from their discolored mucous membranes to their skin, which can appear mottled or purplish in spots. It's a deep-seated physiological predisposition that underlies many of the physical complaints.
And this catarrhal state often intertwines directly with their respiratory challenges, right? The sources highlight capricious hoarseness comes and goes, very changeable. And then there's this very specific cough that sounds like it follows a predictable pattern throughout the day.
Absolutely. The clear distinction between the evening-night cough, which is dry, often suffocating, and aggravated by lying down, forcing them to sit up in bed to get relief.
Gotta sit up.
Right. And the morning cough, which is loose and productive with copious mucus expectoration, that is a strong keynote for Pulsatilla. This positional aggravation, especially when lying on the left side, points directly to that underlying venous congestion becoming worse when horizontal. Their air passages feel stuffed up in the evening, creating a smothering sensation, but then have a copious flow in the morning as the congestion clears.
They also suffer from hay fever, with symptoms like sneezing and watery discharge, and then a copious, thick, yellowish-green discharge, often leading to loss of smell and taste. It's almost a physical mirroring of their emotional shifts, but manifested in the respiratory system.
This consistency of changeability is key. The symptoms are never fixed. When comparing with other remedies for hay fever, like allium cepa, which has that excoriating nasal discharge and bland eye discharge.
Right, the opposite.
Or euphrasia, with burning eye discharge and bland nasal discharge, Pulsatilla's unique profile of bland, yellowish-green discharges from most mucous membranes really stands out. It's that specific combination of color, consistency, and lack of irritation that guides us.
Moving to digestion, Pulsatilla presents some fascinating and often paradoxical distinctions. They are averse to fat food, warm food and drink, and specifically dislikes butter, and a major hallmark that recurs across nearly all their complaints, thirstlessness.
Yes, the thirstlessness is huge.
Yet here's the classic paradox. They craves ice cream, craves pastries, yet they will not digest and make him worse. It's like they crave what is demonstrably bad for them.
This is textbook Pulsatilla paradox. They have a strong aversion to fats and warm food, which they find incredibly difficult to digest, leading to a sense of fullness and discomfort. Yet their emotional, almost childlike craving for rich, sweet, unhealthy foods like ice cream and pastries is undeniable, even though these foods notoriously exacerbate their issues, leading to sour vomiting and eructations. And that pervasive thirstlessness, even in conditions like fever where most people would be parched, is a major distinguishing feature. It's like a paradoxical dehydration. Not a true lack of fluid, perhaps, but a deep systemic congestion that prevents the internal feeling of thirst, even when tissues might need hydration. This makes it a powerful and counterintuitive diagnostic clue.
So many of their stomach symptoms are worse after eating, leading to a sense of fullness, a lump in the stomach, sometimes even hours after eating. It sounds like their digestive system just moves at a glacial pace, struggling to process anything heavy.
Indeed. The sources specify that digestion is slow, and this sluggishness contributes to that persistent feeling of fullness and discomfort. This gastric catarrh, combined with their cravings for things that make them sick, underscores a deep-seated digestive vulnerability. They often complain of a sensation as if food is lying like a heavy stone in their stomach.
And these digestive issues naturally lead to abdominal discomfort. Pulsatilla experiences painful, distended, loud rumbling in the abdomen. There's a sensation of pressure as from a stone and colic with chilliness in evening. But the most striking feature of their bowels, mirroring their mental changeability, is the incredibly varied nature of their stools.
Yes, the famous quote, "No two stools alike."
That says it all, really.
It vividly illustrates the continually changing nature that is a central theme for Pulsatilla across all systems. You might see a loose, watery green stool one moment with copious discharge, and then the next stool might be yellow, fecal, slimy, or even diarrhea alternating rapidly with constipation within the same day or a short period. This almost whimsical changeability of bowel movements alongside their mental and emotional shifts is a profound diagnostic anchor.
And the sources detail hemorrhoids as well. Painful, protruding, blind, with itching and stitches in anus, which are specifically worse lying down, better from gentle motion.
This again points directly to that venous engorgement we discussed earlier, leading to distension and painful hemorrhoids that are aggravated by stagnation, by lying still.
Right.
The specific modalities, aggravation from lying down and amelioration from gentle, slow motion, are extremely valuable differentiators for this particular symptom. It's not just any hemorrhoid, it's a pulsatilla hemorrhoid with these unique aggravating and ameliorating factors.
Moving to the female and male specifics, pulsatilla has a strong connection to hormonal and genitourinary issues. For females, classic and very specific symptoms include amenorrhea, the absence of menstruation, and a particular susceptibility to suppressed menses from wet feet.
That wet feet trigger is classic.
The menses themselves are too late, scanty, thick, dark, clotted, changeable, intermittent, all those changeable qualities again.
What's fascinating here is the delicate hormonal balance and extreme sensitivity in pulsatilla, evidenced by that classic trigger of suppressed menses from getting wet feet. This is a very specific and frequently mentioned cause for complaints in these sources, often leading to a whole range of secondary issues.
Yeah.
The dragging down sensation in the uterus is described as a profound physical manifestation of uterine weakness, often associated with prolapsus. There's even a curious mention of milk in the breasts during menses or in non-pregnant women, indicating an unusual hormonal imbalance that might surprise a conventional doctor, but is a strong keynote for pulsatilla.
Wow.
We see painful menstruation since puberty and a tendency to miscarriage, false conceptions, or even moles, highlighting the vulnerability of the female reproductive system in this constitutional type.
So for young girls, maybe 16 to 18, who have suffered from painful menstruation since their first menses, especially if it was triggered by swimming or getting wet feet, pulsatilla can sometimes establish a normal flow. That's quite powerful.
Precisely. And for males, though less common as a constitutional type, pulsatilla still presents with specific genitourinary symptoms: orchitis, pain from abdomen to testicles. They also exhibit the characteristic thick yellow discharge from urethra, late-stage gonorrhea, consistent with their mucous membrane picture.
Same discharge pattern.
Exactly. There can be stricture, urine passed only in drops, and even acute prostatitis. The male symptoms also reflect that characteristic thick, bland, yellowish-green discharge we see in other mucous membranes. The sources also mention, interestingly, sexual desire unusually strong or even exaggerated sexual desire, nymphomania in women, sometimes linked to the suppressed menses or other hormonal imbalances.
The urinary peculiarities are also quite specific and reveal that same nervous and emotional connection we've been discussing. Pulsatilla has increased desire, worse when lying down, and crucially, involuntary micturition at night while coughing or passing flatus, or even more notably, losing the urine in the first sleep, which sounds almost effortless.
What's truly fascinating here is the unique positional aggravation their desire to urinate is worse when lying down, particularly on their back, sometimes even waking them from sleep because of the pressure.
Okay.
And the involuntary urination isn't just a simple bladder weakness. It's profoundly linked to emotional shifts or nervous reactions, such as surprise, joy, laughing, or even sudden noises like a door slamming or a pistol shot. This underscores the remedy's deep nervous and emotional connections to physical function, where bladder control is influenced by their sensitive disposition.
Right.
If they try to hold their urine during the day, they will likely lose it in their first sleep because then the mind is taken off it, as the source puts it.
And there's a very specific picture of nocturnal enuresis. Little, mild, gentle, florid, plethoric, warm-blooded girls who kick the covers off at night and have nocturnal enuresis. This contrasts with sepia, which is for yellow, sallow, sickly girls. It's these fine details, these small, seemingly unrelated characteristics that really bring the constitutional picture together.
Indeed. The sources even contrast this with remedies like rus, where urinary dribbling is relieved by motion, and bryonia, where it's aggravated by motion, emphasizing that for pulsatilla, the unconscious nature of the leakage during the first sleep, or its connection to emotional shocks, is key. It's these precise differentiating modalities that are invaluable in understanding the unique way a pulsatilla experiences these symptoms.
Finally, let's explore the skin and extremities in pulsatilla. The sources note that the skin feels feverish and hot, while the temperature of the body is normal, and they have a pronounced aversion to warmth and much clothing.
This points right back to that underlying venous engorgement we discussed earlier. The skin might look mottled, erysipelatous, spotted, purplish spots, veins engorged, capillaries tumid, a vasomotor paralysis. They have an unusually venous constitution, meaning their veins and capillaries are often distended and sluggish, which leads to this false plethora, a flushed face that looks healthy and robust, but isn't truly indicative of strong vitality. This internal heat and circulatory sluggishness explain why they desire to wear thin clothing even in cold weather and are irritated by wool or heavy coverings. They just feel suffocated and overheated by them.
And mirroring the changeability we've seen everywhere else, they have pain in limbs, shifting rapidly. The sources call them wandering pains. This is another prime example of their general fluidity.
These wandering pains in joints and limbs, shifting rapidly from place to place without a fixed location, are incredibly characteristic of Pulsatilla's overall changeability. They might experience drawing, tensive pain in thighs and legs, with restlessness, sleeplessness, and chilliness. Yet these pains are often ameliorated by gentle motion, which is a key modality.
Better with motion.
Right. Other physical signs include feet that are red, inflamed, swollen, a sensation of burning in the veins, and soles burn and are bruised when walking. And a very specific, often observed sleep position. Sleeps with hands overhead, perhaps instinctively seeking a cooler position for their head or to relieve congestion.
Now, we arrive at the Pulsatilla paradox, especially when we look at their modalities, what makes them feel better or worse. This is where it gets really interesting for identifying this unique individual, because their reactions can seem contradictory. This section is truly where the deep dive pays off, I think.
This section is absolutely vital, because modalities are key distinguishing features in constitutional understanding. The sources list a very clear pattern of aggravation. Worse, from heat, rich fat food, after eating towards evening, warm room, lying on left or on painless side when allowing feet to hang down. It's a pretty comprehensive list of what disturbs their equilibrium.
This chilly with pain yet external heat is intolerable is such a profound paradox. It sounds like they're internally cold or easily chilled, but warmth makes everything externally worse, almost suffocating. How do we make sense of that?
This paradox makes perfect sense when you understand their underlying venous engorgement. They may feel chilly from within due to poor circulation to their extremities, perhaps, but external heat or being in a warm room becomes utterly intolerable because it exacerbates their internal venous stagnation and congestion.
Ah, okay.
Their blood pools, leading to a feeling of fullness and internal heat. They cannot breathe in a warm room. Once the window's open, chokes and suffocates in a warm bed at night. This profound desire for fresh, cool air, even when feeling chilled, is a supremely important keynote.
Right.
The specific timing of aggravations is also crucial. Stomach symptoms are worse in the morning, the mental symptoms worse in the evening, adding another layer of precise differentiation. Headaches, too, are often worse towards evening and gradually increase through the evening and night.
So when do they find relief? The sources mention better, open air, motion, cold applications, cold food and drinks, though not thirsty. This contrasts sharply with the aggravations and reinforces that picture of internal heat.
This further highlights the internal heat and congestion that defines them. The need for fresh, cool air and gentle motion is a primary comfort, almost a balm for their restless disposition and sluggish circulation. Even ice-cold water feels good going down the esophagus and is retained in the stomach, though there is no thirst.
Even with no thirst.
Right. It provides a temporary internal cooling and relief from that deep-seated internal warmth. The sources give the example of the wood sawyer whose cough was relieved by moving about, but when he became heated from sawing, he had to sit down due to the violent spasmodic cough. This shows the delicate balance needed in their motion. Too much heat, even from activity, can aggravate them. This slow, moderate motion provides profound relief, and they become frantic when trying to keep still, worse during rest.
Now, this is where the deep dive really pays off for you, the listener. Pulsatilla is often confused with several other constitutional types, and understanding the subtle differentiators is key to truly discerning its unique picture. The sources provide excellent comparisons with silica, phosphorus, staphysagria, lycopodium, calcarea, natrium muriaticum, ignatia, chamomilla, sulfur, and even abratanum. Let's break some of these down because this is where the nuances truly emerge.
This comparative analysis is where the insights become really granular, showing how a seemingly similar symptom can mean something entirely different depending on the underlying constitutional picture. It's about understanding the essence of each type, isn't it?
Absolutely. Let's start with Pulsatilla versus natrium muriaticum. The sources present them as almost polar opposites in their emotional expression, despite some surface similarities like being reserved or sensitive.
What's fascinating here is the core distinction. Pulsatilla is described as more natural, pure emotion, almost unedited in its expression, especially when young. Natrium muriaticum, by profound contrast, is a more artificial type, created over thousands of years by the suppression of emotion.
Wow. thousands of years.
Yeah, nature myriadicum learns to disguise herself with cloaks of efficiency, rationality, and acceptable mock emotion. So while both can be sensitive, Pulsatilla expresses it openly, often with tears and a need for sympathy, whereas Natrum holds it in, nurses grievances, projects a different image, often one of stoic independence. This suppression in Natrum can manifest in a very different, often deeper emotional intensity.
That makes so much sense. One is raw, the other processed almost. How about Pulsatilla versus Phosphorus? Both can be very emotional and outwardly sympathetic, especially as children.
With Phosphorus, the distinction lies in their core drive. Pulsatilla is always emotional, personal inner interest, seeking profound connection and emotional satisfaction. Phosphorus, however, is more detached and impersonal, outwardly sympathetic, but less driven by personal emotional security.
Okay.
Phosphorus is generally more active, curious, and adventurous, seeking external stimulation and exploration like an intellectual sponge. Pulsatilla seeks love, whereas Phosphorus seeks knowledge and experience. In their innocence, Phosphorus has an impish, ethereal quality, like Peter Pan, light and mischievous, while Pulsatilla is more feminine and more vulnerable, reminiscent of Alice in Wonderland, softer and more emotionally dependent, seeking constant reassurance.
So it's about their core drive.
Yeah.
Connection versus exploration. That's a powerful differentiator. And then there's Calcarea, which the sources say can be easily mistaken for Pulsatilla because both can be quite homely and nurturing.
They do share traits like being homely, loving ease, and being somewhat sensuous. However, Calcarea is more down-to-earth, matter-of-fact, and practical, grounded in the material world. Pulsatilla, by contrast, is basically sensuous, nurturing, and delicate in her feelings, more emotional, less pragmatic.
Right.
The essence differs fundamentally. Calcarea's essence is structure, inertia, and materiality, concerned with permanence, common sense, and physical security. Pulsatilla's is fecundity, sensuality, and nurturing, the epitome of the purely feminine principle. Both are loving, but Calcarea's love is steady and practical, while Pulsatilla's is emotional and expressive, flowing readily.
What about the comparison with Ignatia? Both have very changeable moods, almost notoriously so.
Yes, both exhibit capriciousness and changeable moods, but the sources are clear. Ignatia's emotions are far more intense, since they are deeper, and they have the volatile power of suppressed emotions behind them.
Suppressed emotion power.
Exactly. Ignatia's sadness is often a heavy, deep, convulsive sobbing that can be triggered by grief or disappointment. Pulsatilla's crying is described as gentle, responding well to reassurance and affection, and clearing quickly. Ignatia also tends to brood and can be deeply resentful, whereas Pulsatilla moves on quickly once comforted. The depth and source of the emotional volatility are key.
And the distinction with Chamomilla, especially in children, both might be ameliorated by being carried or by motion.
The key is, once again, in the quality of the crying and the underlying disposition. The Pulsatilla child has a pitiful cry, a whiny, mournful sound, eliciting a desire to caress and comfort them.
The one you want to hug.
Right. The Chamomilla child, on the other hand, has a snarling, mad cry, a cry of rage and extreme irritability. They are never pleased, scolds the nurse and mother, and demand constant, angry attention, even throwing things. Their intense irritability and demandingness set Chamomilla miles apart, even if both find some relief from being carried or in motion.
Lastly, Pulsatilla versus sulfur, especially with skin issues or certain aggravations.
The sources highlight an antidote relationship. Sulfur patients are often worse from bathing their eyes, finding it irritating, while Pulsatilla's eyes are actually better from washing and cold applications.
Interesting.
Overuse of sulfur can create a state where the skin is red, hot, itching, and easily irritated by clothing. And Pulsatilla is often indicated as the antidote for this artificial state, calming the skin and circulation. This is an important historical and practical differentiation within the provided texts, highlighting how these remedies can interact. We also briefly touched on abratanum earlier, which, like Pulsatilla, has wandering around symptoms, but Pulsatilla sticks to its own text, meaning its symptoms stay within the same class of disease or system, while abratanum changes the whole diagnosis, meaning the suppression of one set of symptoms leads to a completely new and different class of disease, a much more profound shift.
This comparative analysis truly demonstrates how a seemingly similar symptom or a general trait like changeable moods can mean something entirely different depending on the underlying constitutional picture. It's the depth of detail and the understanding of the essence that distinguishes a deep dive from a superficial understanding.
Absolutely. It demonstrates that true understanding comes from looking at the whole person, their unique pattern of mind, body, and emotions, not just isolated symptoms on a checklist. It's about recognizing the entire symphony, not just a single note.
Let's delve into what the sources describe as Pulsatilla's innocence and confusion. It said their thinking tends to be somewhat woolly, it lacks precision and clarity, and they are very prone to indecision because, as we discussed, their emotions pull them in different directions.
This is a fascinating insight into their cognitive process. The indecision arises precisely because Pulsatilla listens to her emotions, which react both positively and negatively to every possibility. Their mind often takes second place to her heart. They are likely to give up easily when rational analysis is required, confirming that their intellect functions as a servant to their emotional needs, rather than leading independently. This isn't a lack of intelligence, but a different prioritization of how they process the world. They will naturally gravitate towards what feels right, even if it defies strict logic.
There's a wonderful anecdote from the sources about a Pulsatilla friend's letter to the Minister for the Environment. It simply read, "Dear Minister, please stop the logging of the trees as there won't be any left soon and the animals will have nowhere to live." It's described as touching in its childlike candor.
It really is.
And another one about a Pulsatilla wife announcing, "I'm just going for a wee" to her husband's boss, completely unconcerned with social decorum.
These examples perfectly illustrate their childlike candor and genuine lack of interest in adhering strictly to social norms or sophisticated communication. They don't mean to appear foolish or impolite. Their internal logic is purely driven by feeling and authentic impulse, not cold rationality or strategic thinking. Their innocence, like that of a young child, means they simply say what they feel and think, without cunning, cleverness, or consideration for how it might be perceived by others. This lack of guile is a hallmark.
The sources mention that when she is upset, she will fall back upon trusted methods of getting by, such as prolonging her crying until sympathy and help arrive. This sounds like a highly selective hysteria, a very powerful, albeit perhaps unconscious, mechanism to gain emotional security.
It is. The example provided in Peter Carey's novel Oscar and Lucinda of Emma Badgery retreating to a cage and whimpering like an injured animal after her husband's perceived abandonment is an extreme but illustrative portrayal of this.
Wow, in a cage.
Her hysteria was a passive yet intensely powerful reaction to a sudden withdrawal of love, designed to elicit devotion and provide a secure, sensuous nest. This kind of highly selective hysteria is a characteristic mechanism for Pulsatilla when feeling insecure in relationships. They may behave perfectly normally with others, appearing quite composed, but demand absolute devotion from their intimate partner, and can dissolve into hysterical tears or withdraw into silence if they feel their deep emotional needs are not being met or are threatened. It's a plea for connection.
So it's not a cold calculation or a manipulative act, but a deep emotional drive for security that leads to these behaviors. This section really encourages empathy and understanding for someone whose internal logic is driven primarily by their feelings, sometimes at the expense of what others might deem rational or socially appropriate. It gives a completely different perspective on what might otherwise be judged as irrational behavior.
Absolutely. It highlights that their emotional volatility, their woolly thinking, and their seemingly childlike candor are integral, authentic parts of their constitutional makeup, rather than simple flaws in character or deliberate attempts to mislead. Understanding this brings a profound appreciation for the Pulsatilla type.
We journey through the dynamic and deeply emotional world of Pulsatilla, a truly unique individual characterized by their profound changeability across mind and body, a fundamental, almost childlike need for affection and reassurance, and a strong connection to what the sources call the feminine principle, a life lived through emotion.
From their distinctive, gentle cries as children, their inherent timidity, to their physical discomforts that shift with time, temperature, and emotion, Pulsatilla truly is the weathercock among remedies. Their pervasive thirstlessness, aversion to fat foods, and remarkable amelioration in cool open air, coupled with a deep emotional vulnerability, paint a consistent and unforgettable picture.
Considering how society often expects us to suppress our emotions, to be rational, efficient, and fiercely independent, what might a world that truly embraced and valued the pure emotion and nurturing qualities of a natural Pulsatilla type look like? How might our daily interactions, our workplaces, even our familial structures change if authenticity of feeling were consistently prioritized over stoic composure?
And, perhaps more importantly, does the observed rarity of adult pulsatillas in modern society tell us more about our world and its prevailing values than it does about this fascinating constitutional type itself? It raises an important question. Are we perhaps losing touch with a fundamental aspect of human nature by systematically editing out our raw emotional responses as we mature, pushing us towards becoming more artificial types in the process? It's definitely a thought to ponder as you navigate your own emotional landscape and observe the world around you.